Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you, everybody, for being here. What a day. Um, what I was going to say at the beginning was I had so much to say anyway, but after today, I feel that it could fill a whole evening, and we don't have that time. So in the short time I have, I think really mainly I want to say a big hello, um, because I haven't met many of you, and I'm going to try and share my screen to also make sure that you have my details, because as Richard alluded to, quite a lot of my time since I've arrived at MISP has been actually looking at the well-being of our charity, and as many charities in this space at this moment in time are finding there's yeah, a whole heap of challenges, not least because MISP or MISP itself relies historically on income from schools, and as we know, schools have been facing really challenging times. So I haven't been able to reach out as much as I would have thought I would have done at this point in my time at MISP. And a lot of what I've been doing is listening, particularly to staff, to trustees, and to those other mindfulness organisations in the sector. And many of you are here today and I've been talking to you, but what I really want to do is hear from our wider community, which is you and others, particularly associate trainers, our members, teacher members of our hub, and anyone even here for the first time that is just thinking about getting involved in mindfulness or mindfulness approaches to education, because I think I really want to be in listening mode for a lot longer. That, having said that, I do want to share today some initial impressions. I think that's sometimes helpful to have somebody that comes into a sector from a different sector, albeit complementary, before I'm totally consumed, and to share some impressions that I have, as well as some thoughts on next steps, some initiatives that MISP will definitely be embarking on. And I really want to leave with some questions for you. So let me just explain, the other thing I would just add to Richard's introduction is I'm a teacher as well. Just to say, before working at the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, my work was in schools and I trained as a secondary school teacher in citizenship. And I'm actually really delighted to be back working in this space. So in terms of initial impressions of this wonderful world, this wonderful mindfulness sector and MISP, some of them will be obvious to you, and some of them may be a bit challenging. I don't know, but these are the ones that I have. Firstly, the potential feels enormous, both in terms of the practices, the approaches, and the opportunities that I think are opening up for us in this space. Perhaps one of the silver linings of what we've all been through during the pandemic is that I can't remember a time, and I've come from working in mental health, where mental health well-being is so experientially known by all of us. We've all, I think, had some kind of experience during the pandemic, or we can empathize with those that are perhaps struggling. And I think what we're seeing in schools, although Faye and Adrian and others have painted a picture of some really difficult challenges, there are glimmers of hope in that. I think this is rising up the consciousness of even those that don't come to MISP conferences. And the potential in terms of technology. The fact that we have an online conference today and we're joined by friends and colleagues in America, in Italy, in Japan, we can do this because of the times that we're in. My second impression is that, or question really for the sector, is whilst we have all this technology and ability to transcend borders, how wonderful is that? Are we really reaching all those children and young people and teachers and parents from diverse backgrounds right here where we are, wherever we find ourselves today? And my sense is we're not, and I'm sure you probably agree we would not. And therefore, how does the mindfulness field, how does MISP, how does each of us here in our spheres of influence ensure that all teachers, parents, children, young people can access what we're offering. If we believe, and I think we've heard today and tasted, that this is important, especially in the times we find ourselves in. So how do we do that? How do we genuinely co-create and ensure our contributions are tailored and land appropriately? And how does MISP and this wider community, how do we continue to safeguard and hold the integrity of mindfulness or mindfulness approaches as a practice and a set of values that has some depth, whilst also being understood and accessible and relevant in all educational contexts? And how my impression of the mindfulness sector, and maybe I'm allowed to say this 9 months in, before I get completely consumed, is what I'd like to say is, where is the sense of urgency? So I know that sometimes that can seem at odds with what we're practicing. It's a non-striving, experiential set of practices that we're introducing. But actually, if we really believe in what we're doing, and given what we've heard today, Jamie's presentation on the existential climate change situation, Uz's reminder that we're dealing with all kinds of trauma in our classrooms and in our communities, and Kadra and others that have been talking about the mental health challenges, crises almost of young people, then is it enough for us to sit and think these are lovely practices and we'll work with them gradually? My sense is that probably all times feel like this, but it feels hard to think of a time where these practices haven't been as needed as now and for our young people. And so therefore, how do we instill that sense of urgency in what we do? So in terms of my personal aspirations for MISP, the things that I know already are that I want, and with your help hopefully, to look at how we communicate what we do, how we make this relevant to everybody. Secondly, how we widen what we do, what we offer, be that support to teachers that have done our programs, or ensuring that the materials themselves can reach a wide audience. And how can we work with you? How can MISP work even more collaboratively than perhaps we have even in the past? Because if we really believe, as we do at MISP, of the importance of what we're doing, my time at the Maternal Mental Health Alliance has taught me you can't do that alone. So how do we work with other organisations, and how do we work with our associate trainers and our hub members and all of you here today to build momentum for the changes that we would like to see? And in terms of communication, just to add that I think we've heard all sorts of examples today as to how and why we can make this relevant to young people. And one thing that we have not touched on as much today, although Jamie mentioned it a little bit, is the whole world of social media for children and young people, and how can we be a beacon to support parents, teachers and young people and children themselves navigate that world? Because as a parent of a teenager, I can't think of a bigger threat to my son's every moment experience than the constant pinging of his phone. And that's not to say that it doesn't bring him wonderful things as well. But what can we say about that? And in doing all of this, I'm really clear that at MISP and in our sector, we need to be able to diversify our income streams, because charities like our own, we can't continue to rely on schools themselves funding the training, although thank you and please continue. But how can we find other sources of income, and how can we work with you as our wider community to generate funds to fundraise together. And already I think I come with a couple of caveats in my absolute enthusiasm for mindfulness, and just to be really clear about those. One is that I think we need, yes, to be mindful of the mental health context in schools, and that's why I was so delighted that Kadra, who I knew wearing another hat, was able to join us today, because I do think it's important that in the mindfulness community we hold that what is going on with mental health, but we see mindfulness not as a fix for mental health crises, but more as a way of improving social and emotional learning, of which social and emotional learning has a role to play in mental health. But we have to resist, and it's very difficult sometimes, I know, when looking at funding applications, to be put as the fixer for mental health problems, because from my own experience, and I'm sure others that are here today, mindfulness in some situations can actually cause harm, can cause more harm, and a mental health crisis, I would suggest, is not the time to start with mindfulness practices. Although having a mindful school climate, having a teacher, having a parent that can interact with that young person that may be having a crisis mindfully, yes, absolutely. But actually doing the training in that moment, maybe not. As Ooze really powerfully highlighted, including from our own personal experience, so thank you, Ooze, for that, we need to continue to be trauma sensitive in our mindfulness training in schools and all educational settings. Which links to what I was saying just before. And if we are sincere about the equality of access, it's easy, I think, to say, yes, we believe in equal opportunities, but if we're really sincere about that, and maybe this is my challenge to the sector, and not just the mindfulness sector, but we need to look at where the gaps in representation are. Where are the barriers? Where are the next generation of trainers, advocates, the passionate figureheads going to emerge? And how can we ensure that children and teachers from all backgrounds can share and discover for themselves and co-create future materials? So I guess that's a bit of where I'm at personally at the moment. Some of my impressions and my yearning, I guess, for MISP and for this sector to, yes, continue to do the fantastic work on the curricula, but also look at how we can support schools and teachers be able to do the curriculum in the school in an environment where this will flourish. So to do those two things. And in terms of examples of what MISP is doing right now and will be coming your way shortly. So we are actively working on and very excited about mapping how the MISP curricula links to the PSHE curricula in the UK. And I really hope and help, and I'm convinced this can really help us show how mindfulness is a tool, is a way in, is totally integrated into that social emotional learning piece. We're also looking at articulating the various pathways into mindfulness within a school, or mindful approaches to running a school. So not, as I say, not just the curricula, but what would it all look like from a student's perspective, from a whole school approach, from a teacher's perspective. And this comes really from listening to feedback from you as well, as to, yes, curricula is great, but what about everything else around it? And we also have just got some additional funding. We need to get more, but some additional funding for a greater number of subsidised places for schools in economically deprived areas of the UK. And that's looking at areas with schools with a higher than average free school meal. indicator, which if you look at the press is actually rising all the time. Anyway, I'll just leave you with that. Just watch this space for all of those things. They're coming alongside, I hope, and I'm sure I would like this to be the beginning of a dialogue with those of you that are here and others that haven't been able to make it. And that's why my address is there, because I want it to be symbolic. I might not be able to respond to everybody, by the way, immediately, but please, my door is always open if you have ideas.
You want to share that again, Emily? We unshared it just for a bit so we could see you.
I think it just disappeared, didn't it?
It's just what you could do is put it in the. Shall I put it in the chat?
Yeah, please, and I just had 3 questions which I wanted to show. I don't know if any of my lovely team can get the 3 questions up on the screen because it's disappeared from mine. And these, if I just say what these are, Richard, if I've got a moment.
Yeah, go for it.
And then they'll also be in the teacher, not the teacher, they'll also be in the questionnaire that comes out after this event. So that's a plug, please fill that in. But also there will be these 3 questions that I think
here they come, I think.
Appear. So how do we best support you in your diverse educational context? Your thoughts, your ideas. If we were in physical space now over coffee, I would be grabbing you and getting all your ideas, and we can't do that in this virtual space. But please, if you have thoughts, email me, put it in the survey that comes across later. So that's the first question. The second question should come up if somebody presses the button. There we go. How can we collectively ensure mindfulness approaches and skills are accessible to all and tailored appropriately? And then the third one, this is a biggie. Ideas for fundraising initiatives to ensure we can reach more audiences and develop ongoing curricula and tailored approaches. I think this is a point that I would like to say. Of course, we will do everything we can to support our community, yourselves, and thank you all of those that are members of our hub community. We also need to ensure that we widen this and that we become or formalize much more that we are a community that is looking to sustain this together, because on our own there are real threats to charities at the moment. So if you have any ideas about fundraising initiatives that you might like to do, and thank you to all of you that have already done it, or join with others, or can put us in touch with funders interested in this space, do let me know, and I would love to talk to you about it. So I think that's it, Richard. I'm sorry if I've run over a little bit, and just a massive thank you to everyone for being here. And if I may, just give a shout out to the team that you can't see, that have been working tirelessly all day. And I'm here representing them as well, so thank you.